is going to impact our Zoom attendance because for those of you that are in the Boston area, it's just beautiful today. I'm looking out my office window and I'm seeing all these students on the Boston College campus, and they're all like, studying and wearing shorts and playing Frisbee and kind of enjoying spring here after what seemed like a long winter. 65 degrees. Beautiful. Winter lasted a year. Yes, Frank. Feel free along the way during this next hour to put some messages in the chat. Also, as we wind down our conversation, we're going to ask you to put your questions in the chat. You can do that throughout the conversation, and then we'll pick some out at the end. That's the only way that we can do it when we're functioning this way where your video is disabled. But we just think it will make for a better presentation for you. So it's 1:03. I'm gonna get going. So anyway, welcome. My name is Karen Kiefer, and I'm the director here at the Church in the 21st Century Center. And thank you so much for being with us. This is our third in a conversation series focused on parishes in the pandemic and post-pandemic. Our first conversation we held about a month ago, and it was about parish leadership. Our second conversation we just held about a week and a half ago, and that was on parishes meeting the needs of underserved communities. And then today we have a view from the pews and a look from parishioners on how they imagine a post-COVID church. So again, you can find the previous two events on our website, bc.edu/C21. Also, my colleague Patrick is going to be putting lots of links in the chat so you can take a look at those. So excited today because I have some of my favorite people. Not only have they really given their careers by serving to serve the church, but also they serve the church from the pews, which is quite extraordinary. So I first want to introduce, we have Rosemary Donahue, who is assistant to the president at Boston College and has worked at Boston College for, gosh, over 40 years, and I don't know what BC would do without her. We also have my colleague, Melody Wittenbach, who is the director of the Roach Center for Catholic Education here at Boston College. We also have Tiger Gutierrez, and Tiga is the assistant director at the Institute for Advanced Jesuit Studies here at Boston College. And then of course, we couldn't have it be all Boston College. So we invited our friend Adrian Herrera, who actually is in Houston, and he is the associate director in the Office of Evangelization and Catechesis for the Archdiocese of Galveston in Houston, which encompasses 146 parishes. So it's really large. So I want to just frame out what this conversation is all about today. And the mission behind the conversation is so that we can mine some good ideas and some best practices that you can take back to your life or to your family or to your own parish. And then have us imagine together how this pandemic has really presented an opportunity to rethink like what parish can be. So that's really what we're trying to do here. This will be recorded, and we will also have this up on our website. And I'll be continuing to prod you into asking more questions via chat. Before we actually get started, I just wanted you to join me in a prayer for our parishes, in a prayer for one another. All of you that are here today, you serve your parishes, you're active members, and you care deeply about your Catholic faith. And I just thought that we could start with a prayer for parishes. So in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Dear God, we thank you now for this house of prayer in which you bless your family as we welcome you on pilgrimage. Here you reveal your presence by sacramental signs and make us one with you through the unseen bond of grace. In communion with all the angels and saints, we bless and praise your greatness in the temple of your glory. Amen. So let's get started. So I mentioned before, each and every one of you serves the church through your work, through your careers. But I want to really focus in on you as parishioners. And can you take a look back over the past year? And how has church life been for you? What have been some of the graces and some of the challenges? And just a couple of minutes, and then we'll really get into other questions. But why don't we, Melody, can we start with you?
Sure, happy to. Thanks for the invitation, Karen. So the pandemic really forced all of us into what I'm terming as a liminal space, a space of transition, where so many of us were kind of grappling with anxiety or confusion and uncertainty as to what was going to happen in the future. And so during that time, those times of kind of discomfort, I often turn to my faith, right? And church can be a space for comfort when we feel that sense of disarray. And so with churches kind of being forced to close, COVID really pushed me to begin to think a little bit about, like, where does faith formation happen, by whom, and how can we really kind of creatively adapt during this time to provide sustenance for ourselves, for our communities, for our families. And so it really kind of pushed this kind of area of innovation in ways where I think we need to be thinking differently about what church means, and to really begin to say that church is not just in that kind of four walls, that it happens everywhere, and how God is truly in all things, as we say here at Boston College, which is one of our Jesuit charisms. And so how can we begin to really see that and act upon that in a way? So that's kind of the start of what COVID at least did for me, to begin to think differently and outside the box as to what church means.
Great. Tyga.
Yeah, I think for me, I think in terms of being in the pews, before COVID, I was, actively involved and helping on the sacristy, helping participate in liturgy. And for me, I think once it was all remote, there was a felt sense of loss. And a part of me, I think, realized, or at least felt a little bit deeper, that, the body of Christ is in the Eucharist, but also in the presence of community, and the community that I actively participate in. And I think for me, virtual Mass as a concept wasn't new. I'd watched virtual Masses done by Pope Francis, or prayer services along the border. But it was the felt sense of separation from that which I'd been an active a part of. And there's a sacredness, I think, to the bodily practice of going to church, to coming together with the community, to being in the presence of another. And for me, it was kind of this external movement of the pilgrim, just to go to church. But I've also found that my faith community has challenged me, to participate and find communion in creative ways during this last year. And I'm sure we'll get to this later, but I think in the time of COVID, there's been a real thirst for the deep connection and communion that comes not only from a sort of spiritual dryness, but from a deep grace of desire. And I feel like I've still been able to witness that take place. And upon arriving to that well, just to kind of realize or feel a little bit deeply that it really is filled with living water, and a community seeking to draw from it.
Yeah. You can see from your smile, Tyga, that's heartfelt for sure. Rosemary.
Well, I agree with much of what the first two people have said. I think for me, it was just a very different experience. I was fortunate to be in a parish where we had the resources and the staff in place to pivot to, remote opportunities for worship. But what I found was that I started to think about my faith differently, and I started to look for faith and to really discern in a very different way what faith meant to me, and the importance of the community, the spiritual community of our parish. And, I think it really has pointed me to opportunities in the future for how we can try to tap into, some of the things that we've been able to do during the types of outreach we've been able to do, the types of programming. In some ways, I think we've changed programming to address the needs of the community in a way that we just never thought about. So, I'm hoping we don't lose some of that as we move back into the church. But, it's really been, if they say absence makes a heart grow stronger, if anything, I think this experience has strengthened my faith in ways that I just never would have anticipated.
Mhm. Well, yeah, I'm looking forward to talking to you a little bit more later in the conversation about some of the programs. Thanks, Rosemary. Adrian.
Well, Karen, thank you first for inviting me. I guess for us, and I say us, meaning the Archdiocese of Galveston, Houston, one of the first things that Cardinal DiNardo did was to issue a decree or dispensation from attending Holy Mass. First of all, also to stop the propagation of COVID-19 and people getting infected, but also for people to, like Melody said, not to instill fear among people, but to kind of put them at ease. Because people wanted to kind of still celebrate sacraments, go back into the parish and continue on as, with our normal lives. But we know that, COVID has interrupted everything, including some of, in a personal level, some of the things that I do for the Archdiocese were put to a stop for the meantime. It obviously, it affected all of us. But we were also, some of the parishes were quite creative and they were kind of prepared to offer, remotely, masses, live streaming masses. Other parishes were not prepared, so they struggled quite a little bit over the summer. But eventually, I think all of us now seem kind of a little bit prepared to take this kind of I guess, hybrid model, virtual and also in-person model. And I agree with Rosemary. Hopefully, we're able to retain both worlds somehow as we move from this pandemic. But yeah, I mean, it's been quite a challenge. I mean, I think it affected every one of us. So yeah.
And also too, knowing, Adrian, that you wear two hats, right? So not only are you a parishioner in the pews, but you
Sure.
also work for the Archdiocese. So that's especially challenging. And I think about you and your family, and just having to, make those kinds of adjustments.
Yes, I mean, we made several adjustments. I mean, for one, we stopped going physically to Mass when it was allowed. And then there was obviously no physical visitation to parishes whatsoever. So yeah, but we were still somehow, connected to our parish because we watched those live stream masses on Sunday. We still do, but it's not the same. I know it's not the same, and we still communicate with friends and other parishioners, through other media like Zoom or GoToWebinar or whatever other video or online conferencing allows. But at least there's some interaction. But you're right, it changed everything. It changed the way that I guess one was kind of used to live in their own lives. It just kind of put a stop to it.
Mhm. I do think that there's going to be an incredible resurgence of interest in coming back to church and coming to Mass. I pray that that's the case, but
I pray that
time
too.
will tell. Like you said, Rosemary, absence makes the heart grow fonder, hopefully. Melody, back to you. So not only are you the director at the Roach Center here and you're committed to Catholic education, but you're also the mother of 3 young children, 3 of whom go to Catholic school. And then the pandemic hits and your family world is turned upside down. But I also know you as a friend and a colleague and how in touch you are with so many young families. And how were they being spiritually fed during this time? And then also, I think we all have, in a beautiful way, our faith gives us an opportunity to look at the grace, like find the graces, so to think about for young families, what are the graces during this time and what can we hold on to and what can we share?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I am the loving mother of 3 little ones, 7, 6, and 4. And so when the pandemic hit, our world was kind of flipped upside down in every way. And in some ways, paralyzed, right? It was like, what do? We can't go to Mass. Our Sunday morning ritual kind of fell out of place. And children really thrive with consistency. And so as a family, we began to kind of think a little bit about how do we engage our children in their faith life and understanding the Gospels a little bit differently. And so when going to Mass shifted to kind of the remote element, we thought, well, this will be great. Let's the kiddos down and have them sit on the couch and watch the virtual mass, and just trying to keep 3 little ones on a couch at home together was nearly impossible. It was like chasing cats. And so the virtual space didn't engage our students in the way that I had hoped at that moment in time. And so I think Pope Francis again and again reminds us that, you know, parents have that beautiful task of passing on the faith to their children, and it begins in the home. And so here, literally and figuratively, right, the church moved into the home environment, and because faith is transmitted in dialect, right, dialect of the family, the dialect of the house, and the atmosphere of the home, here was an opportunity to have church move into our home in a way, and to try to creatively engage our children, right? We pray every evening together, we pray before our meals, we, you know, read stories of the gospel, but to try to do this in a ritualized way on a Sunday morning kind of shifted. And so in a time of crisis, right, we can find opportunity to be kind of to creatively engage. And I'm so grateful for Karen and your leadership with the Church in the 21st Century, because in conversation with a number of my colleagues and friends who have young families, it was clear that there was something missing for those virtual remote masses for young children. And so in brainstorming with Karen, we came up with this idea on Sunday mornings to break open the word with a program called Breakfast with God. And this is a 30-minute program on Sunday mornings from 9 to 9:30, where children listen to the gospel. They get a chance to converse with their parents, with a small virtual community about what the gospel means, and then to creatively engage in some song and some creative art activities and a read aloud. And so it really kind of allowed for the connectivity of what happens in the church experience to become really familiar to children in their home environment and in a way that was at their level. And this community of Breakfast with God has grown every Sunday for between 100 and 200 children and parents. And I think one of the greatest graces of this has been to be able to witness just the beautiful relationship that parents have with their children, and how parents are kind of that, as Pope Francis says, right, the kind of first teachers of the faith, and how parents have an opportunity to listen to and learn about the gospel and then share a language with their child in a way that maybe oftentimes as a parent, it can be sometimes challenging to try to help grapple and make sense of what's happening in the world around you and apply your faith lens to the real world. So it was beautiful to see kind of the catechesis for the family unit be something to emerge. And then also just so beautiful to see children's voices be centered. So every Sunday morning, we have an opportunity to have children offer up prayers. And it's everything from, you know, for grandma and grandpa, or for those that have COVID, to dinosaurs, to, you know, the butterflies, to the different things that they see in their world around them. And so just beautiful to honor the beautiful voices of children, because they truly bring such life and joy to our lives in many ways, and to celebrate that, especially in a time when there could be such darkness and kind of death around us. So that was a beautiful opportunity for us in our center, and I'm grateful to Karen for her leadership in making Breakfast with God happen.
No, right back at you. And thanks, Carrie. She just wrote in the chat that her family loves Breakfast with God. If you're interested in this program, we're putting the link in the chat. Anyone is welcome. It's a Zoom link on Sunday morning, also too for parishes, and we're rolling out Breakfast with, you can take the Zoom link and roll it out in your parish, or you can take the idea, the model, and do your own Breakfast with God. Again, our hope is that this model could be a model for catechesis, or it could be a model down the road, and again, another grace that doesn't go away. And just so happy that we could meet so many young families. Again, everyone's welcome. So I want to shift here a little bit and talk to Rosemary and to Adrian, really about your work in the parish. And, you know, we meet people in our parish, and they're doing such extraordinary work. And yet we're faced with a crisis like COVID, and all of a sudden, you know, you see your friends and fellow parishioners kind of jump in and basically say, how can we help? How can we mind the gap? And really try to follow through and bring the virtual parish community together. I just wanted to know if you had any thoughts or ideas, or maybe situations that have happened in your own parish that you could speak of. Maybe it's that emergency meeting of catechists, or maybe it's the emergency meeting of the pastoral council. Can you look back over the year and talk a little bit about what your parish did, and maybe again some graces that followed? Rosemary, do you want to start?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Again, I think I mentioned in my opening remarks how important the talents and the skills of the staff and the priests of the parish have been. We were fortunate to have people on staff who could quickly assess audio, video equipment for the parishes, for the masses that we were offering, but also could really reach out to parishioners. So I think one of the things we try to do is identify the different needs of the parish, and then try to address them. Everything from recognizing that we're now going to have a whole population of people that are going to be more isolated, trying to identify them, recruiting volunteers to make phone calls to those people, asking if you'd would welcome a phone call. And that helped just to keep people connected. It also helped to provide a sense of community for those people. And I hope that's something we'll be able to continue. But it was everything from things as subtle as, our inability to be at church on Easter. The staff actually created a beautiful display in the doorway, the main entrance of each church that communicated, the glory of the resurrection. And it was just a beautiful reminder of the sacred time, but also, an acknowledgement of our desire and our pining for, to be at the church. But, we've tried to address things as they've come up. Initially, everything came on so quickly. It took a little bit of time to get some things in place, but the pastors stepped up. They were doing blogs. The pastoral staff started a daily rosary on Instagram. And a number of our parishioners eventually began to participate in that as leaders of the rosary. We've opened the church. We knew that we couldn't open, for the liturgy, but we found ways to open the church eventually for private prayer. And eventually we were able to offer communion at those times. We just really have tried to keep going some of our service components. So right at the time that the COVID crisis happened and the closing happened, we were in the process of bringing a immigrant family in, and we were sponsoring them. So in the middle of COVID, we're moving this family into an apartment, trying to set up, parishioners finding new ways to do the collections of furniture safely, and to help them, set up a household, providing food cards, continuing to do our food donation programs, continuing to offer the Evening for Women, which are monthly gatherings of women where we listen to a reflection or a presentation and then have conversation. We just really tried to think of how we could continue, knowing that some normalcy, would be important, and then trying to figure out what the needs of our parishioners were, and then trying to think of ways creatively, to address those.
It seems to me that everything that you just mentioned could live on in our post-COVID church.
Yeah, no, I think that, one of the things, this has been such a great time of innovation. And I also think it's been wonderful for people to be able to use that creative side, those creative skills that they have. And I have no doubts that when we are finally back in church, that we will be doing some things differently. I think the challenge will be to figure out, how we can continue to do everything well, and make sure that we're encouraging people to come back. Don't make it, too easy for them to stay remote, because the physical community is going to be very important.
Mm-hmm. For your, someone had asked in the chat about the rosary that you were doing. Were you doing this? Was a parishioner doing that on Zoom?
It was Instagram. So it started out with our 2 pastoral associates, and then it was wonderful. They acknowledged people as they come in, but then eventually parishioners were stepping in and helping to lead the rosary. And I know that people are doing it live. I also know that people are tuning in later in the day and listening to it, post the live broadcast when they're on their walks. But it's just a wonderful way to connect. And I think, we now have people praying the rosary that probably haven't done so in a long time.
No question. And that's the beauty of social media, using it like that, which is great. Adrian, What about
Yes.
you? And I know you're.
I guess for us, especially parish, it took them a while, but they were able to figure out how to live stream mass, how to get the proper internet and all of that stuff. But also they also figure out a way to create Facebook groups and kind of make contact with each parishioner and, you know, invite them to also be part of the conversation and dialogue. And also a good number, again, I have to speak from diocesan perspective, not so much from my parish, but a good number of parishes were able to continue carrying on faith formation, you know, kind of in a blended or hybrid model, you know, virtual and also in person, obviously following, you know, COVID protocols and all that stuff. But also for me personally, programs, I had one of my instructors during this whole pandemic time, she's been using Instagram and doing a whole speaker series live. Others I know using LinkedIn, others are using Facebook, others are using YouTube. They have their own YouTube channel videos. And some of the priests too, they post their homilies up there to try to engage parishioners, you know, with Q&A questions, stuff like that. But for also from the office perspective, when it came to our programming, we use a lot of Zoom. Every single day, I was using Zoom twice a day with, you know, with group chats and discussion groups, breakout rooms, and try to also follow up with phone calls. I personally follow up with phone calls with some of our lay leaders, and especially also people who've been going through a late leadership program, advanced late leadership program. I made the intentional effort of calling each one of them just to follow up on them, not so much about how's your homework or, you know, how's your work progress and stuff like that, but just to kind of touch bases, you know, how they were doing financially, how they were doing economically, or how they were doing as family, just that. And I think that also, it helped me a lot as well to get to know people that, you know, in another level, not just about, you know, being church from a religious perspective, but also from a human perspective, that you just have to also follow up and walk along with people, and also to make them aware that they were not the only ones suffering through this pandemic. I guess there's this stigma or belief that, you know, that because you work in the archdiocese, you know, a higher level, then that's different. Like you're not affected by this pandemic. It's like, no, we're all affected by this pandemic, and so we're trying to walk together along with parishes and provide services as much as we need. I know that parishes still to this day, they have fed the hungry, they have care for the sick at hospitals. A good number of chaplains, especially one that I know has been, you know, at the forefront, you know, handling COVID patients. And so that's also been quite a struggle. But I think the church is trying to reach out as much as they can, you know, in different ways. Not everything is through physical, but also a lot of social platforms or online types of conferencing. And I guess along with Rosemary, I hope that we're able to continue carrying these two different models and somehow also help people once this pandemic is over, how to go back in person, but also retain the goodness of what we just created, you know, all those different ways of reaching out to people, because not everybody, you know, I know for a fact that I wasn't able to reach all the people that I wanted to be formed in, you know, in their regular Catholic faith through Zoom, and now through this pandemic. I'm reaching people that I had never thought that I was going to reach, because there's so much hunger for people to connect. Yeah. And so I see the goodness of having both, not just like, okay, now let's go back. I don't think there's going to be a going back to the way things they were. I mean, it's something different, and we just have to take advantage, you know, and also discern the goodness of what's going on right now in this world, and how do we take it back once we end pandemic. How do we take the two worlds into one and make it somehow a ministry to the larger church?
I've heard a lot about the phone chains over these conversations, and we don't need a pandemic to keep those going. You know, we're all we all have our own struggles, you know, we all have our own challenges. And it's so, I love the idea that if you're going to 9:15 mass and you meet some parishioners, you know, that later on you could connect and say, are you okay? You know, I mean, I don't think we did that before, you know, and this is again, another grace, like for us to say to each other, are you okay? I care about you. You're part of my Sunday. You're part of my family, you know. Tyga, we want to bring you into this conversation because you obviously represent younger Catholics. And you had mentioned to me in our conversations, just in friendship, you know, the longing that you feel to go back to parish and to go back to mass. And I'm curious, like, what does the church need to do to bring you back and you know, and thousands of young people back into the pews?
Yeah, I think that's a great question.
It's a big question.
Yeah, and a big one. Yeah, I think for me, you know, I think there's been a focus of the sacred community of the church, of the parish, and kind of again that sense of the external movement of the pilgrim towards the sacred. And I've also kind of found that during this time for me that there's also been that development of the not just the external movement of the pilgrim, but the internal movement of the mystic, and that encounter with the sacredness both within me, but also just everything around me in my everyday life. And I think it's hard. I mean, you know, I live with roommates, and doing a virtual mass, figuring out logistics, space, kind of all of that, I think can get a little messy or distracting. But at the same time, to find ways to pray through those moments, I think has been both a challenge and a real grace. But I think through this pandemic, for me at least, there's also been a question of where do I go when I thirst for God or for that deep community? And where do I go when there seems to be a 25% max capacity to the pews? And I think what I've found is that, you know, yeah, there's a sacredness to that space of church, and obviously, you know, the Eucharist and coming to that well of living water, that there's no max capacity limits there.
Right.
And to live into that a little bit more. For me, the idea of parish has expanded in the sense that we accompany each other in the ways we can and from where we can to that well. And I think there's been a beauty in breaking away from my business to physically come together to church, for church, and as church. And I definitely don't want to let go of that. And I definitely want to get back to that. But there's also been a beauty for me during this time in the reach of meeting people in their homes, or of even the opportunity to pray with nurses on the COVID floor on their breaks. And so for me, what I hope is that attention and intention for the creativity and the boundlessness of what parish is can be built upon, and to bring people together.
I'm hearing a lot of intimacy in what you're saying, you know, and it's like, how does the parish and the church communicate that intimacy, right? And coming together, and then meet the longing and bring people back. Again, what an awesome opportunity to do that, you know, and to think creatively in how we do that. Yeah, ministers of Holy Communion, someone just wrote in the chat. We have a lot of work to do, but I also think too that this has opened people up to the possibility of what could happen, you know, what could happen when we all come together. We've all touched on the power of technology, and Zoom has been either our best friend or our worst friend during the past year. But I definitely think it's opened up a lot of doors for our faith life. And I want to talk about technology. Tyga, I'll stay with you a little bit, because I know that you are Mr. App, and that you are, you know, really believe in online pilgrimages and online apps to really grow our faith, and you actually help develop them. Can you share a little bit about some of the resources that you've developed that other parishes and other people that are here today could take advantage of? And then I want to open it up to everyone. to talk a little bit about technology, just because I believe that technology is our best friend right now.
Yeah, I'd love to. So from my experience, we started off last year really just through the challenge and creativity of the pandemic. And we started doing a virtual candlelight mass where we had maybe 50 to 100 people daily. And then once the school academic calendars ended, we turned that into a 4-day retreat based on the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius. And we just kind of found that there was so much hunger for it. We had about 700 people for that 4-day retreat. And then we said, we got to keep going. So we ended up doing a 12-week virtual retreat where we had over 1,000 people from 24 countries. And now with the Roche Center and with C21, we're about to relaunch our 12-week virtual Ignatian pilgrimage app, where we had about 6,000 people from over 50 countries in our test run. And we're hoping to expand that. And I think so much of our lives is on technology now, and COVID has only come to exacerbate that. And while there's a definite reality to Zoom fatigue and that we've caught on to a little bit more, I think, trying to look at other ways, more than just Zoom at this point. And I found that people don't necessarily just want to get off technology, but there's also a desire for that technology that they're already on, that they have to use to actually be nourishing and to feed their spiritual lives. And so kind of for me, that challenge is to integrate in a healthy way rather than to simply be turning technology into just the working drone. And so, I don't know, I think from my experience, I think of a particular retreatant that I was encountering in our virtual retreat named Joan, and she's a nurse from New York who shared in our virtual community board in our virtual prayer wall, that she was finally on a lunch break from the COVID floor, and that, we all do it. We get a moment away from work and we end up back on our phones. But here she was, a frontline worker in the middle of her shift, asking for the community to pray for her strength and for the health of her patients. And so I think, what I've seen is that technology can be a grace. From my experience, age has not been a barrier. There's been a real desire and willingness to adapt. And the reality of technology is that it is part of our daily lives. And instead of running away from it, I think that challenge to transform it has been tough, but I think really inspiring for me. And I found that there's issues, isn't that people can't necessarily learn how to use the technology, but oftentimes I think that providing adequate guidance to fully partake and to fully participate. And I've learned that from my own failings at doing that. But I think when given appropriate guidance, I found that people of all ages have been able to encounter and share in their desire for God. And maybe the last thing I'll say here is that some of the biggest things we've been working on is thinking of accessibility in our virtual program design and of various prayer styles. I mean, we know from our parishes that there are some who will stay until the church closes praying the rosary, and others who will come mainly for the homily. And so I think similarly in our virtual prayer spaces, I think thinking through those kinds of spaces and platforms where there can be recitational prayer, imaginative prayer, active, passive, text, audio, video, and I think most importantly, an interactive and dialogical prayer that ultimately invites participation and our interaction of our desires for God.
That's great. I know that Patrick was putting the link to the Journey with Ignatius app in the chat, and follow along with us. I mean, it's now on Android and Mac. We'll probably be launching it, would you say, in the next maybe 3 weeks to a month?
Definitely.
Yeah, pray for us. But anyway, it has expanded our whole audience. So now we're bringing in high school kids that are like, oh, this is so cool. And usually we're like, well, this is for this audience, this is for that audience. But for parishes, this will be extraordinary. So we're grateful for your wisdom and your work on that for sure. Anyone else want to talk, chime in about technology because it is so important? Rosemary?
Yeah, I just want to follow up. I think agreeing with what Titus said, that Zoom and the technology has been a lifeline during the times of COVID. And it's been really essential for our ability to communicate with people and to keep them engaged, to help them to experience a sense of fellowship. But, I can't help but think that going forward, it's going to be a door. You're engaging people that otherwise may not have participated in a retreat. I can't take the time, I've got a young family, I can't, physically be present, but now you're offering opportunities for people to engage on a deeper level. And I think some of those experiences can actually lead people back to the church. So I see this as a wonderful opportunity, because one of the things I think that's really essential especially with younger people, of course, I can't speak for younger people, but I see in the students that I engage with and young people in my own life that it's really the experience of God, the experience that the experiences they have that bring them to God. And unless we can start to think about new ways to provide those types of spiritual experiences, help them to connect, to their own faith life, help them to realize that it's actually there, even though they may not think that they're spiritual people.
Mhm.
But I think, this is a way of really beginning to engage people in a way, that, our expectation that they'll come to church, that they'll, participate in person. I think there's a whole group of people that we can connect with using technology. I think it's an extraordinary opportunity.
No question. Anyone
I
else?
also want to add a little bit about technology. Yes, I agree. Technology is a great tool to somehow connect people. But still, there's going to be a point where, when the pandemic is over, yes, people may want to come back and be in person. And so to me, every time, there's a conversation even among the staff where I work, when it comes about technology in person and when parishes are going to fully reopen and bring back the people, there's a paragraph that comes to my mind, and it comes from Evangelii Gaudium, from Pope Francis. That's paragraph number 88, where it says, and I just want to read very, very quickly and shortly. For just as some people want a purely spiritual Christ without flesh and without the cross, they also want the interpersonal relationships provided by sophisticated equipment, by screens and systems which can be turned on and off on command. Meanwhile, the gospel tells us constantly to run the risk of a face-to-face encounter with others, with their physical presence, which challenges us, with their pain and their pleas, with their joy, which infects us in our close and continuous interaction. So I think this is a great opportunity for the church as a whole to see, to hear the needs, to hear the cries of how the world, how COVID has impacted the world, and also the losses of people. I think before we start getting people back in churches, this is a time there's got to be a time of healing. People need to heal. There's got to be a intentional sacred space for people to heal, to come back and say, the church truly cares for the people we lost during this time of pandemic. Not just a regular mass, but kind of like what we did with 9/11, like what we do every single year that comes around. It becomes a memorial type thing. So I think, yes, technology can help us, but I think the church is called to go beyond technology to reach the sacredness of the other. I think this is a great opportunity to learn, so that once we decide to go hybrid, if that's the way to go, and if people come in person, that we have to be consciously aware that people are hurting. We can't expect to go back again to what we were before pandemic and say, oh yeah, let's come back to masses like we used to and celebrate sacraments, and then not talk about the loss, not talk about the pain or the hurt or whatever costs, all these hurt in families. I think we have to speak and we have to talk about that.
I think too that, again, all of you had mentioned this, but that's an opportunity that calls parish into the grace of creativity and how your parish can help parishioners heal. Parishioners that maybe couldn't have a funeral for their loved ones, or maybe they've been sick the last year, or whatever loss that they've been going through. is there a particular Sunday that they rally around? Is there something that the parish can do? I know here at Boston College, we have a tradition. It's called the prayer ribbons, and we invite students to fill out a prayer ribbon. This is actually the BC commencement ribbon, and they write an intention, and then we tie the ribbons to the fence on main campus, and collectively we come together and share your intentions. I mean, something as simple as that, where parishes are just ordering ribbons, prayer ribbons, and people can write their intentions. But I do think we need to get creative in the way that we heal our parishes and we heal our parishioners. And I do think that God's calling us to do something new and to do something different.
I mean, the Conference of Bishops have Catechetical Sunday, or they have Catholic Education Week. Wouldn't it be nice if we had, I don't know, COVID-19 Sunday or something to reflect on what had happened, especially for the lives of all those people that, that were lost, Catholic and non-Catholic, but how it really has affected humanity.
Mm-hmm. That's so true. I know time is just falling off the clock here, but two things. I really want to hear your hopes for the future, but also, Melody, quickly, we know if we don't have the young families back in the pews, it's harder and harder for us to get them into Catholic schools. And Catholic schools have really just done so much this year, and they have just been, many have been so resilient. So I just wanted, knowing that your hands on the pulse of Catholic schools, maybe just mention something about moving forward in a post-COVID church, especially for the schools that are attached to parishes.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I think to Tyga's point of the frontline workers, right? The nurses in New York, just the teachers and leaders in Catholic schools who persevered during a time and opened up their classrooms, their communities for children to learn has just been nothing short of heroic. And in terms of schools, I was able to be in a school a couple of weeks ago and just to observe and witness how children are learning with stations of plexiglass around their desks and masks on and distanced apart, but they're together. And there's definitely a joy in being in the presence of one another and being able to learn with one another, even though there's the distancing. And so the way that schooling is happening right now, there will definitely be things that continue on beyond COVID, right? And I think that these ways of operating won't go away until every child is vaccinated. CDC just came out with a report yesterday saying that you no longer have to have your desks 6 feet apart. You can now have them 3 feet apart. So next fall, the desks will be a little bit closer together, but they'll still be apart. But I think the question that a lot of our panelists are kind of grappling with is kind of like, what have we learned that we want to continue to build forward, to continue to advance our schools or our church or organizations in a way that takes the beauty of what was, and during this kind of disorganized state and time, to kind of recreate something that can be and be better for more, right, for all. And I think the remote learning options, the hybrid options, I think that those are here to stay. I think that there are families who want that option for their children and will continue to seek out those learning opportunities. I think that teachers, we have a two-way immersion network of schools where one of our schools is connecting with another school of children in Guatemala. And so just to be able to converse in native languages with one another, there's a kind of a localization of the global that's kind of happened because technology's been that vehicle that has allowed for those doors, as Rosemary spoke of, to be opened in ways that we weren't thinking of before. So I think the kind of creative pulse of what teachers have the capacity for is only just beginning to emerge. And I think too, as more and more schools are required to be open, our Catholic schools have definitely led the way, and our public school friends are definitely kind of taking lessons of what's worked and what can be done to kind of persevere and kind of continue to create these spaces of learning and joy for students that are in our seats. So a lot of good.
Yeah, and I think back over the last year, and God really is the God of surprises. The things that we thought that will never work, that and here we are. We're trying it on, and it's working. And I think about just what what we did with adoration and confession and outdoor masses right up until December. And there's a lot out there, a lot of creativity. I know I have to plug one more program that the center sponsors. It's called Faith Feeds. It's a small group discussion guided by a downloadable guide. And we thought it could only be in person. It's the intimacy of the conversation. And then we launched it a year ago on Zoom, and it's become a runaway success. So we meet every Friday at 1:00 here at the center, online and Zoom, and we do weekly faith feeds. You can do it at your parish too. Again, Patrick will put the link in the chat. Again, we continue to be surprised. One of the questions from one of our parishioners or one of our guests here today was really geared towards they really wanted to know, like, what specific programs do you think that people could use in a post-COVID church? I know we've already mentioned some of them, but I just wanted to give light to that question. Any particular programs? I mean, we've got the apps. We talked about Breakfast with God. Rosemary, you listed off so many programs, faith feeds. There's a lot happening. I don't know if anyone else wants to chime in on.
Well, Karen, one of the things I think we've all discovered is the wealth of resources that are available online. There are programs our parish, is participating in one, but I think there's so many resources that people can tap into, and I think would be great if somebody could compile a list of the things that are available, because I think it does enable you to connect. Our Lenten program is focused on social justice and racism, and it's been very well subscribed, and it's wonderful, and it's a very substantive program, and it's a real commitment for those that are participating in it. But I think there's so many things and a variety of topics that are available. So I think those are some of the resources that parishes can continue to use without having to kind of recreate the wheel.
We might be able to put together that list at the center. And so for all of you that are out there, if you have ideas or programs that you think other people would know about, if you could send us that information at church21@bc.edu, we can come together and work together and collect all these resources, because I do agree, they're all out there. It's just a matter of finding them and then figuring out if they work for your parish. Also, there's lots of talk about hope. So as we wind down this conversation, and here we are, Holy Week next week, and we are just getting a chance to realize the glorious hope of Easter, and what that holds for all of us. So what's your hope for a post-COVID church? Anyone? Adrian?
I guess for me, Karen, would be a sense of communion and also a sense of mission. I hope that this time where people may feel isolated and sometimes depressed at some point, that during this time, our Catholic faith would bring a sense of kind of bringing up that sense of missionary identity. And so that is my hope, that people would have taken this time to say, I'm ready to always as being Catholic, but to also be a fully Catholic, immersed, intentional in my way of living the faith.
Thank you, Adrian. Anyone? Melody?
Sure. In 1 Corinthians, right, we hear that we are many parts, one body, and when one part suffers, the other parts suffer with it. And so I think that this COVID time has really shown us how interconnected and interdependent we are as a community. And so as I think a little bit about like my hope moving forward for our church is that we don't forget how that interconnectedness and how we affect our actions affect one another. And I think too, just kind of, and that how that spirit of communion can really be lived out, and that we really are better together when we're in community for and with one another. And finally, that the children have such a special place at the table, that children bring such hope and joy to our world, and that we need to just continue to center and celebrate them in a way that I think our church will continue to heal, and there will be new life as long as we make sure that the youngest among us are always present. So
Our future church, Melody, our future church. Tyga?
Yeah, I think for me, one of the hopes is that to utilize the tools that are emerging, and I think, seeing virtual space for me as a tool, and ultimately our faith is of a God that's incarnate, and my hope is that the post-COVID church, we find ways creatively expand our reach while still tending specifically to that depth, so that our interactions, however they may be and wherever they may be, there's an opportunity for that interaction of our desire and thirst for God that ultimately leads to that embodied encounter of communion.
Thank you, Tyga. And Rosemary? I know Rosemary too, someone had mentioned that the program that you mentioned that focused on social justice and racism is called Faith and Racial Equity, and it's in the chat. So by Just Faith Ministries. And I've heard a lot of parishes using that program.
Yeah, my understanding is it's very well structured, and it's very worthwhile, especially in these times. It's a very worthwhile program. I guess one of the things that is one of my big hopes is that there's such a sense of longing, but also excitement about the possibility of returning to church, now that the vaccines are out. I just hope we can figure out a way to build on that. It's such a wonderful opportunity to try to take advantage of that energy to engage people and to help to raise, their sense of connection to the faith and to the church. And I hope we can figure out ways to do that with all of the different sectors of our community, the young, the families who, so on, help in providing resources to help raise their children in the faith. But I think this is such a unique opportunity where it's such an important time of excitement and expectation. And I just hope we can figure out how to build on that.
I think too, it's a reminder that we all need each other, and that we're all in this together. We are one church, and technology does give us an opportunity to connect and swap ideas. And the pandemic has given us an opportunity to rethink and reposition and a rebirth. It's so fitting. It's a beautiful resurrection, maybe, for all of us. So I wish all of you blessings as we enter into Holy Week and a beautiful Easter. Thank you so much, Rosemary and Adrian and Tyga and Melody, and for all that you do in your daily work serving the church, but also in all that you do in your parishes and for your parishes. And to each and every one of you that attended this webinar, thank you for growing our church, and thank you for your contagious faith and all that you do to share that for the love of God. So anyway, know that we recorded this conversation. It will be up on the C21 website. That's bc.edu/C21. If you have any ideas, questions, comments, you can email us at church21@bc.edu. We're always open, we're always listening, and we're always trying to put together resources, because our whole mission is to be a catalyst and a resource for the renewal of the church. And that's a beautiful, beautiful privilege. So again, thanks for coming, and thanks to all of you. Have a great rest of your day. And if you're in Boston, get out there. It's sunny and 65. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you.